As a developer, I know the importance of code blocks with syntax highlighting, and Astro supports it out of the box. I'm going to show you how to get started, both in Markdown and also in Astro components, along with some configuration options, including choosing between two different options available to you by default in Astro. You ready? Let's jump in. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. I've started with a basic project from the Astro command line where you just create a new project and choose the blog template. This gives us enough to work with so I can show you everything you can do with code blocks. I want to start first of all with looking at Markdown, in part because this does a really good job of showing you what you can do in Markdown. So if I come over to the blog, there's actually already a post called Markdown Style Guide. I'm going to pull it up over here, Markdown Style Guide, just so you can kind of see what's going on. And then I'll show you as we go here. Obviously, they're showing you headings and all this kind of stuff. What we want to do is scroll all the way down to the code blocks section. So let's come over here to code blocks. There we go. So right over here. So notice you can use 3 backticks and then just the name of whatever it happens to be. So here they're surrounding one with the other. So that markdown here is being showed over here. And then HTML right here. Now what this actually translates to, once they get rid of the markdown outer kind of section, the outer wrapper is just the HTML here. And notice that it highlights all this with HTML. Now in Markdown, there's a default theme that you can change in the Astro config that I'll show you in a second. And then there's a lot of languages supported, pretty much anything you want, but you can also add your own custom types as well. But that's the very basics of working with it in Markdown. Of course, you don't have to have an entire code block. You could just be like talking about, and then you could add code like this, and it would also highlight that as well. So if I come over here, you'll see that now it highlights it just as an inline element as well, but usually you're wanting some kind of code block, you would do it like that. So let's say I came over here and I was talking about the Astro config. All I'd have to do is do 3 items like this, and the config is just a JavaScript file, so I'm going to do JavaScript, and then 3 dashes like this. Now let's go ahead and open up the config, and I'm just going to copy all this and jump back over here and paste it in right here. And notice it just styles it just like you'd expect. All right, cool. Let's say I also wanted to do an Astro file. There's actually support for Astro as well. So I can come over here, add an Astro file, and maybe let's grab the index page. So right here, I'm going to grab all this and just drop it in right over here. So if I save that, you'll see that it shows right here, and it even gives me a nice scrollable overflow section if it goes further to the right. So again, that's the basics of working with it inside of Markdown. Now you might want to configure this, and so you can come over here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this doc up over this way. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that it uses, I think it's called Shiki, I could be wrong, I don't know how to pronounce that, and Prism you can also use. Markdown uses this by default, but you can actually change it around here, which I'll show you in a second. But down this way, let's say you're using the default configuration, you could change certain things about it using this Markdown configuration option. So let me come inside here. This is just at the top level of the config, and drop all this in here. And it looks like I forgot one more. There we go. Okay, so notice here that you've got 2 different themes, one for light and one for dark mode. So if you switch between themes, you can use that as well. And then you can change to a bunch of different themes by default, or add your own theme if you'd like to as well. So if you want to add your own theme, all you have to do is use the same config and pass in your custom theme that you import from a JSON file. There's a configuration style using their documentation. So you want to jump over here and just make sure you follow this. And obviously here are all the ones that are included that you can pick from if you want to, or you can add your own themes as well. And they'll show you how to do that here. Now I've switched it over to Dracula. Let's come over this way. And now you'll notice it's not using Dracula. It's using GitHub Lite right here. So in other words, you need to choose between these 2 things. So if I cancel this one out right here, you'll notice now that it uses Dracula. Of course, if you want to have both a light and a dark mode, you can come over here and just say for light mode, it's this, and for dark mode, it's this. And in this case, I want to use this right here because I don't have a dark mode setting for this site. So notice I can use any theme I want. I can also pass in specific languages. This is especially helpful if you want to pass in like a custom language. This is where you would do that. And then you've got other configuration options like wrapping or different transformers you can use as well. And they give you documentation to all of these. So this would be how you configure it for using it in Markdown. That's what we've talked about so far. Now, if you'd prefer, you can actually switch over to use Prism instead. So let's jump back over this way. And you can see that you can switch it over to syntax highlighting using Prism instead. So in order to do that, I need to actually comment all this out just like that. And then at the top level of this Markdown configuration option, I'll just pass in syntax highlighting equals Prism. All right, just like that, we've actually got now styling over here. It's at least styling it correctly. There's just no syntax highlighting. So if you want the syntax highlighting, you have to actually pass that in down this way in the configuration options. Prism uses CSS classes, so you have to bring your own CSS style sheet for syntax highlighting to actually appear. So what you would do is copy one from here and then add it to your public directory, and then you can see how you would link to it, and then it would show up. So that's why there's a little bit more work with Prism. So I typically just use the Shiki options, and those work just fine for me. If I come back over here, you'll notice that now everything's back set and using Dracula. So that's how to work with it in Markdown itself. Now, Astro also includes a code block that you can use in any file, not just a Markdown file. So let's come back over here. We're going to go to the index page, and I'm just going to get rid of pretty much everything inside of here so we can focus on just the code block that we want to add. So let's get rid of all that right there. And I'm just going to import code like this from Astro. Now notice I get this autocomplete because I'm using the Astro extension for Astro:components. That's the one I want. Now, if I jump over here to the API reference, you're going to see how to use this. You can import it and then simply pass in your code block and then the language you want it to display in. Now, rather than having to rely on your configuration options inside of Markdown, you can do this per code block, right? Because we're inside of Astro components, so you can pass these things in as props. So maybe let's just copy this one right here and drop this in here. If I come back over here and we go to the home page, you'll notice now all I've got is this right here, but it's actually using this dark plus. It's using my code block and then has language selected. Now, of course, I could change this over to use something like Dracula. I could also say this is something else entirely. So maybe I say this is Markdown, even though it's not, and it'll now convert the syntax highlighting to use the Markdown syntax highlighting. Now let me jump back over here and just talk about a couple other things that you can do. Notice that if you want something to be inline inside of an Astro file, you can just use the inline component as well. And then you can also turn on or off code wrapping. Now again, you don't have a config option for every single code block on your site using Astro if you're doing this inside of Astro files, but you can pass in custom themes and languages if you have your own custom themes and languages. You would just do the same thing you saw in the config file where you would import it up top and then you would pass it in as a prop down below. Now the code block uses their default syntax highlighter, but you can actually also use a Prism highlighter as well. You just have to install Prism like this, and then a lot of the same options exist. Here you'll notice that I'm passing in a language, I'm passing in a code block as well. But once again, if I want it to actually display syntax highlighting, you have to bring your own style sheet. If I jump back over here, let's come up here. This is the thing we looked at earlier where you have to actually pass it in the public directory and then reference it in the head of the document where you want that displayed. Okay, so that's a very brief overview of how to work with code blocks in both Markdown and also inside of Astro files using two different syntax highlighters with all the options available. I hope it was a big help. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.